here are the first 3 versions. The idea of the mountain bow, or this endeavor to build it, has 2 purposes for me. The first is skill. I've recently really focused on individual skills when bow making, and specifically fiberglass bow making, because it'll aid me in what I want to accomplish in the future. But if you don't have the skill, then maybe there's something you want to build and you can't build it. So the mountain bow has partially been experimental to test out my skills and to see if I can improve on specific individual skills of takedown fiberglass bow making. And through that, there's a second purpose to the mountain bow, which is to build an ultimate elk hunting bow. I've been learning how to elk hunt in the Colorado mountains, and specifically with a traditional bow. Now this is kind of, in a way, handicapping yourself, but I've never backed down to a good challenge. With that, I've thought, what would be the best bow design for the way I like to hunt? And that's what I'm trying to discover. Because for hunters, depending on where you hunt and how you hunt, will change completely the type of bow you want. For example, the Shatterproof Archery Bones bow would probably be my #1 choice for white-tailed deer hunting. Tree stand, ground blinds, things like that. It's short enough that you can get it into tight places, but it's extremely smooth, so the accuracy is gonna be really great. And that's exactly what I took elk hunting this past year. But the one thing I didn't like about it is that I couldn't take it down. I wanted to be able to take it down and pack it inside my backpack for the times I would travel through the mountains and didn't need my bow. Preseason, postseason, after games down, and when it's not legal to shoot at dark. The other thought is, could I actually make this a little more condensed? Could I make this bow a little shorter? Now there's not great benefit of making it shorter than your arrows, because if you're gonna strap your arrows on, your limbs can be that long too. But could I make it a little bit more compact? So after my testing on many bows, but specifically the last 4 I've done on the mountain bow, I think I have the design exactly how I want it. And hopefully today I'm able to nail it. There are 5 specific things that are the big buckets of what I'm going to do for this bow. The first one is I'm gonna try to pull off a 12-inch riser. These risers are 14 inches, pretty good size. Still pretty small, but I think with the design I'm gonna do, I can even shorten it. Number 2, I'm going to have a gradual reflex rather than a recurve, but I'm gonna have the reflex curve similar to how much a recurve would curve. The benefit to this is that you can make the limbs thinner. On a tight recurve, you need wider limbs for stability. But if it's a more gradual curve, you can have thinner limbs and still achieve stability. Thinner limbs means less mass, which means increased speed. I'm creating 24-inch limbs. This should be the sweet spot to where I can get it to my full draw, but allowing me to shorten the limbs as much as possible for the design I'm choosing. I'm gonna do a 15-degree riser angle. Basically, I've tested different angles, and I think with this limb design, those 2 are gonna pair fantastic. And I'm gonna have a more forward handle than I've had on some of these. And the honorable mention number 6 is I'm gonna have a tip overlay wedge to make the tips of the bows non-bending or less bending, resulting in more stored energy and a faster shooting bow. When bow making, I kind of think of a continuum of speed and smoothness of shooting, or maybe even a percentage. And for this bow, I'm probably tipping to the side of speed a little bit more than smoothness, maybe 65 to 70% speed, 30% smoothness. I don't even know if that makes sense, but it does in my brain of how I'm trying to design this bow. I'm pretty excited about this because I think I might be able to pull off something pretty special here. In bow making, there's a lot of different factors that go on. And so it's easy to mix up correlation with causation. And I've studied bow making and I have a lot of theory, but now that I've actually got hands-on experience, I feel like the theories are becoming more clear to me, and my experience is starting to pay off for me personally, in that I'm starting to be able to implement an idea I have in my brain. If I can think of it, then I'm getting close enough that if I can think of it, I can almost build it, no matter what. And that's really exciting for me. And I believe I can, it's just how many iterations will it take to get there. So my design today is unique, a little bit risky, but also the payoff could be amazing. And with the Bones bow that we make to sell at Shatterproof, this one here, I designed this and made this based on what I like to shoot. And I had specific purpose in mind when building this and reiterating it. And so I built the bow that I like to shoot. As a matter of fact, this is my main bow. This is the one I use when I'm going to shoot for fun. But as different purposes and interests evolve for me, I want different types of bows. And that's where mountain bow, I guess we'll call this mountain bow 4.0 is coming into play. Maybe it's 3.2 or 3.1. This is the fourth iteration, kind of. And the better I get at bow making, I find that the iterations are getting quicker. For example, this entire wall is basically bones iterations. Slightly different forms, slightly different risers, fade outs, material on the inside, and so on. And even with the bones, we've sold 2 different iterations, the first one, and then we have a current second one right now. And I'm finishing up the 3rd iteration of the bones bow. Based on the few hundred we have in circulation, now we have more feedback and what people are using it for. And I'm gonna come out with a 3rd version here very soon that's hopefully gonna be better than the first 2. That doesn't mean the first 2 are bad, but what that means for me as a business, if I find out what people actually want versus what I think they want, I can eliminate some of the things in the bow that people don't really care for, reduce the cost, and give people an equally good product for hopefully a lower cost. And all of that experience has aided me in the fact that I've been able to make 4 sets of limbs, 3 risers, and I think this one that I'm gonna start building today is gonna be the best. This block of wood right here, I'll put the name up here. I'm not sure where it's originally from, but my dad was in Japan this past year and he brought this back for me and said, hey, I got some more awesome wood for you to build a bow with. So I'm gonna use this solid chunk of wood as a riser. It's what I did on this one up here. It looks beautiful, and to work with this is fantastic. It's very dense, heavy wood, which is gonna help with a shorter riser, because a shorter riser means less mass in the riser, which can mean more vibration because there's less mass to soak up the vibration, so to speak. But with a heavier riser, hopefully that'll help counteract not having such a long riser and still provide a smooth shooting bow. But even before building the riser, let's go ahead and build the form and get one of the limbs glued up. When making new bows, you have to build a form for every single bow, which is kind of cumbersome, but I'm getting better at it. And that'll allow us to be a little more speedy, because as the limbs cure with the glue on them, we can start working on the riser and then go back to the limbs later on and always have something to build. This is the most recent design I did, but instead of having such a dramatic recurve, I want it to be more gradual. So I'll start here, and I've already marked this, and I want it to end here, but instead of having it come up and then real sharp, I'm gonna make it come up real gradually, peak out in the middle, and then come back down. The key to building fiberglass bows is jigs. So let's set one up for this curve. Some string and a pencil will aid us. What we want is part of a circle. If you stretch out a circle really big, you can have a nice consistent arc. So I've anchored the thread way over here, and then I'll move all the way over here to the form, and the thing I'm trying to do is finding the right distance where the arc is exactly how I want it. So if I come to the top middle here, mark that, and move to the side, I see that this is not nearly as steep of an arc as I want, so I need to reduce my distance. The thread I'm using is stretching, so that's gonna ruin it, so I'm gonna switch over to some thicker string. So we're looking to be at the top here, and then if I extend this down, we're right here. So we need to drop it down another inch, which means moving this closer to our source. Okay, moved it a little closer, right there, move it over. Nope, still need to be just a little bit steeper. Okay, so we got it where we want it, and I know this isn't the most precise method, and digitally doing it with CNC or printing off a template would be better, but this is one of my favorite things to do, which is to quickly prototype. This is a good way to do so, at least for me, and it gets me close enough that I have nicely tested results. The method of doing a form for a singular glue up or 3 or 4 glue ups is completely different than the method I would use to build a permanent form for hundreds or thousands of glue ups. We don't want this to be sloppy because then we'll get bad results, but we also don't need to make something that is overbuilt. I've had different people reach out to me about building fiberglass bows and wanting some tips. And although I'm not the best and don't have the most experience, I have been doing it for about 3.5 years and have hundreds of bows under my belt. And the one tip I always give people is that your bow is only as good as your form. But with a fiberglass bow, the form is the bow. Whereas with the self bow, you may heat it and adjust the curve later on, and then most of it's built in tillering, where yes, you do tiller fiberglass bows, but most of it's built in the form. So if your belt sander and your table saw is all square, your form's gonna end up being a whole lot better. That's my number one tip. And for those who don't know and want to try to build a fiberglass bow, but maybe don't wanna do all the work of the form, at Shatterproof we sell pre-glued up fiberglass bows. I even wrote an entire book and outlined every single step of how to build this bow. And then I also have a couple videos on how to do it, about 1.5 hours of instruction on how to build out what we call the kit bow. It's our bones, the bow we sell, but it's half built to let you finish it and try it out for yourself. So check out shatterproofarchery.com if you're interested in that. The goal is to help more people enjoy more archery. And so we're gonna do that any way we can. You know, it's weird because I learned to build bows completely by feel and by eye. And these were Osage Orange self bows. Now with fiberglass bows, if you do that, it's not gonna turn out super well normally, but you can still use some of the feel and the eye to make sure things are good and great. And one of those things I do is I'll feel this form and make sure I don't feel any odd humps, because anything that shows up on the form will show up on the bow. And you can actually feel better than you can see to make sure this is completely smooth and I got it really good. Now, the belt sander is really hard to get perfectly square. So I'm gonna go to the router to square off the form the rest of the way. And earlier when I was talking about skills, these are the skills I'm learning, these woodworking skills that a lot of woodworkers would have, but I haven't learned them because I came from using a scraper on a bow with a hatchet, and that was it. To prep the limbs, we'll do 2 pieces of fiberglass, 2 pieces of bamboo. I'll do a wedge near the riser, as well as probably a carbon fiber wedge near the limb tips. So we've got lots of preparation to do for the limbs. Let's do that now. So I'm gonna try to pull this off real quick and explain what I'm doing. We're on a time crunch because EA40 is a 2-part epoxy, and you've got like a 50-minute pot time, but I really think it's more like 20-25 minutes when you heat it up. You like to heat it up to make it smoother and easier to spread. It's thinner, it goes on better. It's a much better way to do it. But since I film myself 95% of the time, glue ups are the hardest because it's hard to run a camera while doing this. Okay, so we have 2 parts here. We've got fiberglass tape and we've got some plastic wrap I'll cover the form in plastic wrap to start. And again, this is a temporary method, but I have tried about 10 or 15 different methods of gluing up bows for prototyping, and this is by far the fastest, easiest, cheapest, best way. I'm gonna give you some gold right now. Forgot to clean the pieces. Ugh. Okay, where's my... I start off by getting the dust off the pieces of material. I do that with a little bit of acetone. You want a really clean surface. Is that it? Yes. The nice thing with acetone is it will evaporate, dry. I'm not sure, what does it do? It goes away quickly. So now with well-mixed epoxy, we can start applying to every single surface. It's easy to do too much. It's also easy to do too little. Both are not ideal. If you goof, too much is probably the way to go. But if it overspills on your form and you're doing an MDF prototype form like me, overspilling on that means the form's gonna probably be pretty ruined after one use. So use lots of plastic wrap and try not to do too much glue. Okay, so see if I can do this without ruining the camera. Okay, so we got both sides with glue on it, and then we'll press these together. And go ahead and line them up now. That'll help keep them from sliding. Okay, next we're gonna have our little carbon fiber piece. Make sure I get it oriented correctly. Oh, I need to get this side glued as well. These plastic glue spreaders I like, and they work really well, and they're really easy to clean afterwards. Okay, so you see as I spread, we unaligned. There we go. Okay, carbon. Now we're gonna do other piece of bamboo. I'm using bamboo for the tip overlay wedge as a test, I guess. I never have. But I made or not tip overlay wedge. This is the riser wedge. Super important piece. But since it's bamboo and bends a little bit more than other materials I've used in the past, I made the fade out extra gradual. If I pull this off, this bow's probably gonna shoot pretty fast, it looks like. Now the top of the carbon fiber. The carbon fiber piece is to stiffen up the limb tip to add a little bit of a lever. Okay, next bamboo. Normally this isn't much of a time crunch. It's primarily due to trying to film at the same time. Line it up. I like to anchor everything to one side. So I'll choose a side and then everything's gonna line up perfectly from there. And let's place this in. Boom. Okay, and then if you can just press it all together. If you get glue on the outside, you can clean that up later, although a smarter method is probably to put some masking tape there. That's the best method. So we're gonna line actually the bamboo side up all together. Okay, I'm gonna line this up in the exact same location as I did the last one. Get a couple wraps just to get it secure and work it down. And I'm not wrapping it too tight now so that later on I can adjust the individual pieces on the inside. We'll secure it down completely with the fiberglass tape. Now I want all of these to be lined up with the edge here. So this is where you can manipulate it. So I'll just use a little tool here to move them around. I've tried using just the plastic wrap to clamp the bow on the form, and that didn't work well because when you put it in the heat box, the plastic expands, whereas when you use the fiberglass tape, that stays tight. So, a few more wraps here to hold that in tight, and then we'll use this fiberglass tape, and you'll see in the specific tape, there's these vertical striations, which is the fiberglass. So when I grab this and pull down on it, I can pull over 100 pounds of pressure and the tape won't break. So I'm clamping it with the tape. Okay, so we got this side locked in here. Let's flip this. Put that in there. Plastic wrap or shrink wrap everything else. Another thing this is doing is by making the form the exact same width as the limbs, it's avoiding left to right movement. Which of course is super important. Gloves can go off, thank goodness. Okay, fiberglass tape. And you want to make sure you get plenty of pressure on the fade outs. If there's gaps, that's where it generally is. Now, I've never seen anybody do this method, but I've had many, many successful bows this way. And if you're trying to make a fiberglass bow for yourself, this would be the best way. Wish I would have known that 300 bows ago. On all of our the bows we sell, all the permanent bows, we use a fire hose with pneumatic pressure, and we pump that over 100 psi and it evenly pressurizes the bow. But for prototyping, this works great. And because the glue flows in heat, that's what it's meant to do, is spread out. It spreads evenly once it's heated up. If I can get this in the heat box soon enough, the glue on the inside will heat up anything where there might be a glob, and it all spreads super evenly. And okay, so next we're gonna take this over and put it in the bow oven. My bow oven's just a plywood box with chicken coop heat bulbs in there, I think. And then I just insulated it and put a timer on it so that it can run a few hours. The goal is basically 140 to 165 degrees. As long as you're in that range, it's gonna work really well. So we'll let that sit 4 hours and we'll wait for tomorrow, and we should be able to get a lot done tomorrow. For me, the hardest part of a takedown bow is the connection from the limbs to the riser. I've made a couple little templates, but I think I need to make a jig to make it even more consistent. I get decent results with the way I'm doing it, but the difficulty is matching up the limb to the riser perfectly so there's zero limb twist. After the rough shaping done on a bandsaw for the riser, I do the rest with a belt sander. And I've done a lot of risers by hand and by eye, so I know exactly how I want it to feel and how I want it to look. So I am just going to shape this completely by eye. Hand tools increases two things: time that it'll take to get the riser completed, and number two, probability of success. By removing less material at one time, the chances of screwing up go down. An interesting side note is that I've made the pins and the bolts the exact same distance on all of my risers, so I can literally interchange any riser with any limbs I have. And so now that I have 5 or 6 pairs of limbs and 4 risers, I think it'd be fascinating to mix different limbs with different risers and try different combinations to test out and experiment to see if we could maybe find a design that works better or worse than we thought. But by making this distance consistent will allow me to experiment quicker with the greater inventory of bows I get. Put your thinking caps on, here's one for you. The torsional center line is often not the numerical center line. So here I'm marking the numerical center line, but that may not be how the limb twist is gonna happen necessarily. So my method is to cut the limbs out extra wide, put a real bowstring on it, and then inch in the sides I need to in order to achieve the perfect torsional center line. Another way to do this is before you cut down the width of the bow, to add cable blocks onto the bow and go ahead and bend it to brace height, and then move the cable blocks to the torsional center line and mark it there, and then remove the width. Two different ways of accomplishing the same thing. I haven't ever taken the time to make a good pair of cable blocks, so this is my workaround, and so far it's worked great. I tried some carbon fiber for the tip overlays, and it is so powdery when you sand into it and cut into it. I don't think I'll ever do this again. It's just not the best material for tip overlays, even though it's light. Everything's looking fantastic, but I made one fatal mistake. Not fatal in the sense that the bow's gonna break, but fatal in the sense that I can't shoot the bow. Before I covered this, two things happened around the shop here today that reminded me I need to thank you guys more often. First, we had a customer come into our archery shop, and this gentleman's come in before and been a customer for a long time. And just how nice and great the interactions are is fantastic. And then the second thing is I was just walking over to do a little bit more work in the other shop, and I heard my brother on a phone call with, I don't know who it is, but one of you guys, and just the interaction just is so nice and so generous and so kind and so awesome that I get to do this. And so I just wanted to say thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Now let's talk about my big mistake. As I was planning out this bow build, I needed to come up with a thickness. To a degree, it's a guess because if it's a brand new design, you don't know exactly how it's going to react. But I have enough information that I knew I could get pretty close. So I built the limbs so that I would have a 50-pound bow. The one problem I didn't account for was the static tip overlay wedge, as well as the extra long bamboo wedge. So I did the thickness for a 50-pound bow when there's 18 inches of working limb. But with this limb, there's only 13 inches of working limb, which threw my entire calculation so far off that I can't even get a bowstring on this bow. Based on bows I've built in the past, I think if I were to draw this completely back, it would be a over 100-pound bow. So let's fix it and make some new limbs. I have already prepped the material for the new limbs. Okay, so I'm starting to glue up now, and I have made a couple of adjustments. The first one is that the bamboo limbs are just thinner. I'm also increasing the length of the limbs by 2 inches. I'm using an even thinner bamboo wedge, and then I'm using a really small fiberglass wedge instead of carbon fiber wedge. This fiberglass wedge is 20 thousandths inch thick, and it tapers. It'll be a little bit lighter than the carbon fiber, the thicker wedge that I had, and I'm making it a little shorter. So the limb tips, the last 4 or 5 inches will be static, but it's gonna be less dramatic than what I had previously. The main reason I wanted to make these adjustments beyond the fact that it was too heavy of a draw is that based on the way this looks, I don't think I'd be able to quite get it comfortably to my 29-inch draw length without experiencing some stacking with this limb shape and riser design. So by adding 2 more inches to the limbs and reducing the tip overlay wedge by 2 inches, should help me have 4 more inches of the limb that can bend and will allow me to get to my draw length. Real briefly, another thing I've done is use string rather than the tape. I'm running out of tape, so I'm gonna add a little bit of string here to reinforce it. And the main thing is that you just get really good pressure. I've done this on some of my hickory bow build videos if you've seen those, but it works for fiberglass too. With that, I'll show you just a quick montage of building these limbs, and we'll quickly move on to tomorrow where you can find me finishing up the bow. Quick montage, but I hope it was a good one. Welcome to the Kramer Ammons YouTube archery channel, Archery, where we make mistakes. I changed too many factors at once. 3 to be exact. 4 to be more precise. I changed the length of the limb. I changed the length and material of the tip overlay wedge. I changed the thickness of the bamboo in the center. I changed the type of fiberglass I was using, and that makes it almost a complete guess again. With all that, the good news is the bow is looking really good. Throw a quick string on it. Look at this, the design and shape. Everything that I wanted except it's a 20-pound bow. If you remember, I changed 2 things. I changed the limb length and the length of the wedges and the limbs. This extended my working limb area. I extended it, I think, a little further than I need. I think this bow could probably draw 36 inches or something, especially with the forward handle. So before making the 3rd set of limbs, I'm gonna do a little test. I'm gonna reduce the tips down in length, and then as I have a wedge in the middle, I'm gonna add another wedge on the back to stiffen it up just a little bit near the tips. And basically I'm gonna attempt to modify this bow to make it closer to a 40-45 pound bow. And also test this design to see how short of limbs I can get away with. Those first limbs I couldn't even test because they were just way too beefy. So now let's reduce the length here. I haven't decided how much. I'm gonna take a minute and think about that, but let's reduce the length and real quickly we'll see what happens to this bow. Before I reduce the length, I'll show you shooting this and show you the full design so you can see, and I can see in the video, what it looks like with different limb lengths. It just gets so exciting to try new things, so I tried a bunch of them at once. It's a really good shooting bow. I can't stop smiling because I think I'm about to pull off my favorite bow that I've made. We spend all this time talking about speed and smoothness, but there's a third thing there, and that's accuracy. And I haven't spent a lot of time talking about this. Accuracy is the end goal, and speed and smoothness, my camera's tilted, and speed and smoothness can help us get there. And this is totally that. I so often try to hold back my excitement because I feel weird on how excited I get about things like this. But we're gonna let loose today, baby. Okay, so this is like, if this limb length is extremely smooth, that's great in this shape. But where I'm getting really excited is I'm gonna reduce this maybe 4 inches on each side for an 8-inch shorter bow. And maybe that one shoots a little bit faster, but isn't quite as smooth. I can now build 2 separate sets of limbs with the same riser that's super comfortable, by the way, which I'm really liking so far. And I can use the different limbs in different scenarios. My childhood dream is coming true. Gosh, this is good. I think I'm getting better. I want to get Kaz's reaction, so I'm gonna go get him real quick. You guys have been requesting him more, some people have been, so let's go find him. Okay, I want you to shoot it and give me your first thoughts.
It's really fun to pull back. I don't know if it's just because it's light or if it's just like a smooth draw. I also like the shape of the handle. It's comfy.
Is it comfortable?
Yeah.
I thought so.
It's too. Like the Maverick, and I'd even come back more right there, but it's very comfortable. That's really smooth too. I barely feel anything. I feel like it's fast for how light it is.
Yeah, for like a, what is it, 18, 20 pounds probably?
Probably, it's like 21 3/4, but yeah, it's like fast for how light it is. I want to know the draw weight. Like,
it's not fast.
It just is really fun to shoot. That's awesome.
I think it's probably, what, a 16-pound bow?
I'm guessing it's 21.
Really unique shape. Okay, so 28 inches is about half an inch above that mark. A little higher up, right there.
16.8. That makes it even more impressive that it is as fast as it is.
Should we test it?
Sure. Yeah, it was.
So should I reduce the length of these limbs to make it 30, 40 pounds? Or should I just make another pair the same length? Or both?
I would make another pair the same length, unless you want a shorter bow. But if it's just to get...
Well, I think this draws to like 36 inches, so I was gonna just do a shorter bow.
That's true, you could do that.
No way. No way. That's not even right.
It's snappy for...
And you didn't even draw it all the way back.
121.
Maybe you did.
For my draw, your draw might be a little touch longer.
Yeah, let me take a shot.
129.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. My longer draw.
I wouldn't change anything except the draw weight. Yeah, I wouldn't change anything because it's working so well. And then if you wanted to drop it down, try and get more speed or something, you could.
So you're saying I need to make another set of limbs?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Just change one factor.
I changed the thickness of the bamboo, the length of the wedge, the thickness of this wedge, the length of the limbs, and a different type of material.
It's a couple factors.
Yeah, it's just like, I just can't stop experimenting. Okay, the video continues.
Or you could do it on the next video.
I could do a...
Stay shatterproof. We'll see you on the next video.